I am a 38-year-old father of two, and for most of my life, I have been treated like the reliable background character in my own family's long-running sitcom. The one who appears in the corner of scenes, fixing things, carrying things, solving problems, but never being acknowledged as anything more than a convenient piece of moving furniture. My name is Daniel, and my kids are Mason, who is 9, and Lily, who is 7. My wife passed away 3 years ago, and ever since then, I have been doing everything I can to make life feel steady for my kids, even when nothing about life has felt steady for me. I grew up in a large, messy family where everyone crowds into the same house on holidays and acts like nothing is wrong, even when everything is cracked underneath. My mom, Ellen, who is 62, raised me and my younger sister, Ashley, who is 35, almost entirely alone. My father left when I was 11, and from that moment on, I stepped into the role everyone insisted a boy should naturally fill. I shoveled driveways for extra money, helped mom keep the lights on, fixed broken appliances we could not afford to replace, and watched Ashley whenever mom needed to work extra shifts. It was not a heroic childhood, it was survival, and I was the designated adult far too early. But despite everything I did, it was not me the family adored. It was Ashley. She was the pretty one who had a single loose curl fall, and suddenly every aunt would gasp about how she should be a model. She was the talented one who could lift her leg in dance class, and suddenly, the entire extended family believed they had a future television star in their bloodline. When Ashley needed money for dance competitions or leotards or makeup kits or trips to New York or new point shoes, hands reached into wallets faster than I could blink. When she needed help paying for college application fees, every relative rushed to pool their money. Meanwhile, when I once asked my Aunt Carol, who is my mother's older sister, now 67, if she could loan me a little cash to fix the car I needed just to get to work, she looked at me with this patronizing smile and said inside the same breath, "Daniel, you are a big, strong man. You will figure it out." I figured it out, of course. That is what men are supposed to do in this family. Solve everything. Carry everything. Expect nothing. Fast forward to this year's Thanksgiving. For the first time since my wife died, I actually felt a spark of hope. Life was not perfect, but it felt stable. I had worked my way up at my HVAC job and finally earned a promotion. The kids were doing really well in school. I had managed to save a little bit of money, enough to buy things without calculating each dollar like it was a life or death decision. I told the kids we would bring something nice to Thanksgiving this year, something real. Mason and Lily loved that idea because they said they wanted people to see that we could contribute something grown up. So I splurged on a fresh turkey. Not the frozen kind, the kind that still has that ridiculous price tag dangling like a warning sign. $84. I kept checking the receipt because it felt surreal to pay that much for a bird. But the kids were excited. We bought ingredients for 3 sides they picked themselves. I felt proud. I felt like maybe the holiday would finally be ours again. Every year, Thanksgiving is at Aunt Carol's house. She treats it like her personal kingdom, and the family treats her like some kind of benevolent but temperamental queen. I had never missed a Thanksgiving there, not once, not even the year my wife died. I showed up hollowed out and barely breathing, but I showed up because that is what I do in this family. I show up. Then on Monday, my phone rang. I saw Aunt Carol's name and felt this warmth that I do not often get anymore. I answered, and instantly I heard her voice coated in that syrupy sweetness she only uses when she is about to crush someone gently, like placing a velvet blanket over a landmine. She said, "Daniel, listen, we have a big family this year. Everyone is bringing someone, so maybe you and the kids do not come this time. We do not have the space." I actually laughed at first because it was so absurd that I convinced myself I had misunderstood. I asked her if she was serious, and she sighed with the tone of someone who believes she is being delicate while stabbing directly through bone. She said, "Well, the kids are loud, and honestly, this year is going to be more adults-oriented. It might be overwhelming." Overwhelming. My two well-behaved kids. The same kids who had never once misbehaved at her house. The same kids who always said please and thank you because I had raised them to be respectful. The same kids she used to claim she adored. I felt something sink inside me, like someone had pulled out a foundation stone from a building I had been balancing on. I did not argue. Maybe I should have, but years of conditioning taught me that arguing with Aunt Carol only makes her more self-righteous. So I hung up the phone, sat down at my kitchen table, stared at the $84 turkey, and tried to figure out how I could possibly explain to my kids why they were suddenly uninvited from a holiday they had been looking forward to for weeks. When I told them, Mason did that thing where he tries to act like he is fine, but his lip trembles, and he clenches his jaw and his eyes look like a storm building. Lily cried immediately. She asked, "Did we do something bad?" Hearing her say that felt like a hot blade twisting under my ribs. It was the first time in my life I felt genuine hatred for Aunt Carol. Not frustration, not annoyance, hatred. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat in the dark and made a decision. I was not going to let my kids feel unwanted. I was not going to let this year be another moment where we stand in the wings while the rest of the family congratulates themselves on how inclusive and loving they are. I would make Thanksgiving for us, and I would make it good. Better than anything Aunt Carol could bake or decorate, I would make something my kids would remember. Then the next morning, before the sun even lifted itself over the rooftops, someone knocked on my door. It was my mom. She was already dressed up, wearing a coat she only pulls out during holidays, hair done, makeup on, earrings chosen to match her blouse. Like she had been prepared for hours. She stood in my doorway and with this bright, falsely cheerful voice said, "I am here to take the kids to Thanksgiving." And she said it like she was offering me a generous favor, not twisting the knife deeper. I felt disoriented. I asked her what she meant, and she explained that Aunt Carol had called her after speaking with me. Carol had told her, "Do not worry, we will make room for you and the kids. Daniel can stay home and rest." Rest. That was the official explanation for excluding me. I could rest, while my kids and mother went to the very event I had been uninvited from. They were fine with Mason and Lily. They were fine with my mother. They were not fine with me. Something inside me cracked open. It was not loud. It was quiet and final, like a rope snapping under slow tension. My mother looked guilty for half a second, but I do not think she fully grasped the cruelty of what she was participating in. Or maybe she did and chose not to face it. I cannot say. I did not refuse. I did not want to punish my kids for the adults' behavior. I hugged them goodbye and told them to be good and that I loved them. They left with my mom, confused but excited because they are still children, and children should not be the ones to carry the weight of an adult's betrayal. But after they left, I did not stay home. Because even though the family had made their message clear, I was done playing the background character in their sitcom. I was done letting them decide where I belonged. I had a plan. I did not show up angry. I did not show up ready to shout, argue, or explode the way everyone in my family always assumes I will if I push back. I showed up with proof. I showed up with evidence. I showed up with the kind of calm that scares people more than yelling ever could. Before I even left my house, I opened my banking app and moved the $600 I had saved for Christmas gifts into a separate account titled Do Not Touch, because I knew exactly how this visit could unfold. Thanksgiving in this family always turns into a parade of financial favors that end with someone saying, "Daniel, you know we count on you." Or, "Daniel, you always come through for us." I was not going to let anything eat into my kids' Christmas this year, not a single cent. When my mother left with Mason and Lily, I waited exactly 1 hour. I wanted the family to fully settle into whatever narrative they had cooked up about me. I wanted them to feel secure in the idea that they had successfully sidelined me. Then I drove over to Aunt Carol's house with the turkey I had purchased and the 3 sides the kids had chosen. I carried everything up the walkway. The air was cold enough that my breath fogged. My hands felt stiff from gripping the handles of the bags too tightly, but I kept walking. As I reached the front step, I could see through the wide living room window. That house has always been arranged like a theater stage, everything placed for show rather than comfort. There was my son and daughter sitting at the tiny kids' table shoved into a corner near the hallway, far away from the cousins who were their age, completely isolated. They were sitting quietly, not misbehaving, not bothering anyone, just placed aside like they were afterthoughts at their own family's holiday. That image alone filled my chest with a slow, steady fire. Then I saw Ashley, my sister, sitting with her boyfriend Lance. They were perched near the kitchen island. Behind them, placed in a way that was almost laughable if it were not so infuriating, was the uncooked turkey I had bought. It was still in its packaging, untouched, identifiable down to the wrapping. Lance was talking while glancing at it, and I could read his lips perfectly enough to make my stomach twist. He said something along the lines of how perfect it was because now they did not need to buy one themselves. Ashley laughed the kind of laugh she always saves for people who enable her selfishness. Then Aunt Carol swept into view, waving her hands dramatically the way she always does when she is about to declare herself the martyr in any situation. She looked annoyed. I could see her mouth forming the words I told him not to come. I told him. She repeated it twice, as if each repetition would make her more righteous. My jaw tightened so hard I felt my back teeth grind. For a second, I let myself breathe. In, out. Then I walked up and knocked. When the house went silent, I could feel it from outside. It was that thick, stiff, judgmental kind of silence my family specializes in, the kind that says everything before anyone speaks. Aunt Carol opened the door only halfway, as if I were a salesman or a stranger trying to convert her. She gave me a pointed look that practically dripped disdain and whispered that now was not a good time. The way she said it made it sound like I was intruding on a private event rather than the holiday I had been a part of my entire life. I smiled, just a small one. I told her calmly that it was fine because I was not there to stay. I stepped inside carrying the turkey straight to the counter where Ashley and Lance sat. I put it down in the exact spot where they had displayed it like stolen property and told them that they could use what I purchased but that my kids would be eating with me. Ashley scoffed under her breath, and Lance muttered something about drama, but I did not even turn my head. I had no interest in acknowledging people who had already made up their minds about me long before I arrived. I walked across the room toward my children. The moment Mason saw me, I could tell he thought something was wrong. He whispered with this small, worried voice that he wanted to know if they were in trouble. I rested my hand on his shoulder and told him that no one was in trouble and that I was there to fix something. I could feel him exhale with relief. I straightened up and looked around the living room at every single person who had chosen to treat us like we were disposable. And without raising my voice, without grandstanding, without giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing me emotional, I announced that I was taking my kids home and that we were going to have our own Thanksgiving. I added that anyone who wanted to join us was welcome. The room froze. Faces shifted. Some looked guilty, some looked relieved, some looked irritated like I had ruined their show, but the one that hurt was my mother's. She stood up, smoothed the front of her blouse, and said that she would be staying. She said it casually like it was nothing, but it landed like a punch to the chest. My own mother choosing the same people who had excluded me instead of standing beside me and her grandchildren. I swallowed it. I did not let it show. Then something unexpected happened. My Uncle Richard, who has always been the only person in that family who treated me with consistent fairness, stood up. He shook his head, looked straight at Aunt Carol, and said that what she had done was unacceptable and that he was leaving with me. His wife stood up next, then their son, then their son's wife, then two cousins who had always been quieter but kind. One by one, they aligned themselves behind me like a small, quiet rebellion forming in real time. By the time I walked out the front door with my kids' hands in mine, I had 7 people walking behind us. 7 people who saw the truth in what had been done, who refused to participate, who chose decency instead of comfort. We drove back to my house. I turned on music, opened the windows a crack for the smell of cold air, and let the house fill with life as we cooked. The turkey roasted perfectly. Mason basted it like it was a science experiment. Lily sprinkled herbs with more enthusiasm than accuracy, but it made everyone laugh. My cousins helped set the table. My uncle carved the turkey while telling stories about his own childhood. Stories I had never heard because he had never felt free to talk around the rest of the family. People filled my home with warmth. Real warmth. Not the stage kind that my family pretends to have at big gatherings. We ate until we were full. We laughed until stomachs hurt. My kids never stopped smiling. For the first time in years, I felt what a holiday was supposed to feel like. No guilt, no manipulation, no whispered criticisms. Just people choosing to be together because they wanted to be, not because they had been trained to perform family roles on cue. It was the best Thanksgiving I have had in my entire adult life. But the real chaos came later. The next few hours turned into a digital riot I hadn't asked for. Around 8 p.m., I finally checked my phone and nearly dropped it. 83 messages, all from the family group chat. The first were from Carol, firing off accusations about hijacking Thanksgiving and claiming I'd shown up just to embarrass her. Ashley piled on instantly, calling me dramatic and acting like she hadn't spent the entire holiday pretending my kids didn't exist. Then my mom chimed in, saying I'd put her in a terrible position. It was like watching a car crash involving people who insisted they were the victims, even though they were the ones holding the wheel. I sent one response, short and sharp. I wrote that they had uninvited me on purpose, told me outright I wasn't wanted, and that next time they should just be honest about it. The chat went dead like the Wi-Fi had cut out. And then Richard broke the silence, dropping the information everyone had quietly ignored. Carol had told everyone there wasn't room, but she'd added 3 extra guests at the last minute. 2 of Ashley's college friends and some neighbor she was trying to set Ashley up with. While Ashley already had a boyfriend, so there had been room. Just not for me or my kids. That was the spark. Messages started pouring in privately, not publicly. Half the family telling me they were done pretending Carol's holiday dictatorship was tradition, done tolerating Ashley's entitlement, done pretending any of this was normal. People who had sat through years of awkward dinners suddenly admitted they'd been tired of it long before I ever said a word. But the message that hit hardest came the next morning. My mom. She apologized. She admitted I'd been right about Carol's treatment. She said she'd stayed because she didn't want to make a scene, but that she'd watched how I handled everything and realized she wanted to be with me and the kids next year instead. I cried. Not gonna lie. 3 weeks passed and life had finally started shrinking back into something that resembled normal. The kids were talking excitedly about school plays and winter crafts, instead of asking why their cousins did not want to sit with them. I had gone back to my routine of work, making dinner, and researching Christmas decorations that did not look like cheap plastic. The Thanksgiving fiasco still sat in the back of my mind, but it was no longer sharp. More like a bruise that hurt when touched but did not control my entire day. Then the phone rang. I looked down and saw Aunt Carol's name. My first instinct was to decline the call and toss the phone across the couch, but I answered. Part of me expected her to launch into the same tired excuses she had always used, but her tone was softer than usual when she asked if we could talk privately. I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see how far her self-awareness went. She took a long breath before telling me that she had not handled things well. She said she had been overwhelmed and then delivered the truth like it was a swallowed object she had finally coughed up. She said that Ashley had asked her to uninvite me, claiming that I would make the day awkward because I would talk about my wife. My wife. The woman who had died. The mother of my children. The person whose absence still shaped every holiday, every bedtime routine, every quiet moment. The idea that Ashley wanted to sidestep that grief because it made her uncomfortable was pathetic. And yet it was so on brand for her that it barely surprised me. Carol kept going, saying she should not have listened, and that she was sorry. She sounded small, like someone who had finally realized the scaffolding she built around Ashley was collapsing under its own weight. I listened. I accepted the apology because holding on to the anger would only rot me from the inside, but I told her I did not trust her anymore. And that part I meant. I expected that to be the end of the Thanksgiving fallout, but the universe was apparently on a roll. 2 days later, Ashley called me. I stared at her name on the screen for a full minute before answering. I expected her typical routine of deflecting, guilt-flipping, or sulking, but she shocked me. She apologized. A real apology. She admitted she had always been jealous that our mother depended on me more, even when we were teenagers. She admitted she had hated how easily I became the person everyone called when something broke, when someone needed help, when a crisis needed solving. She said the Thanksgiving situation blew up in her face because even her friends told her she looked entitled and mean. Hearing that from her felt like the ground shifting a little under my feet. It was almost strange to hear her speak without the usual layer of attitude. She told me she wanted to start fresh. I listened and I let her speak without interrupting. And then I told her that a fresh start was not impossible, but it was not happening right now. I told her I was not in the place to rebuild trust with someone who had actively chosen to exclude my kids from feeling welcome. I did not sugarcoat it, and she did not argue. After that, things got quiet. Not tense, not loud, just quiet. Like the family had collectively paused to reconsider how they fit into each other's lives. For the first time, it felt like I was not orbiting their expectations. It felt like I was building something for myself and my kids instead of trying to earn a seat at someone else's table. So this year, for Christmas, I decided to host dinner at my house, not out of spite, not as payback. I did it because my kids deserved a holiday surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to be there. People who saw them as more than an afterthought. People who knew how to show love without conditions. The first RSVP came in so quickly it startled me. It was my mother. She said she would be there early to help cook. Then Uncle Richard and his entire family messaged that they would bring desserts, drinks, and board games. Their enthusiasm made me laugh because it felt real, not obligatory. It felt like they wanted to show up, not like they felt guilted into attendance. There were 3 names missing from the invitation list by design. Carol was not invited. Ashley was not invited. Lance was not invited. Not to punish them. Just because I was done trying to force relationships that required me to shrink myself. I was done letting my kids be sidelined. I was done pretending the family I grew up in was the same thing as the family I wanted to build. As Christmas approached, the house felt different. Warmer, fuller. The kids helped hang lights along the windows, and Mason nearly fell off a chair trying to put the star on the tree, before Lily shoved a pillow under him as a safety precaution. They laughed the entire time, and for once it felt like the holidays were not a minefield. On Christmas Day, when people showed up one by one with food, gifts, and genuine smiles, I felt something settle in my chest. Something steady. Something I had not felt in years. For the first time, I felt like the main character of my own story instead of the background helper who existed to support everyone else's plot lines. And my kids learned something I wish I had learned earlier. They learned that family is not defined by tradition, blood, or loyalty to the people who treat you like furniture. Family is defined by the ones who show up because they want to. Family is the people who walk through your door even when they were not invited somewhere else, even when they were told you were not worth showing up for, even when standing beside you cost them something. That night, as I watched my kids fall asleep under a blanket of twinkling lights and half-eaten cookies, I realized that our family had changed. Not by accident, not by force, by choice. And this time, the choice was ours.